The biker didn't recognize Steven Seagal. And that mistake would cost him everything. It was late evening at a quiet roadside diner, the kind of place people stopped at only when they wanted peace. The parking lot smelled of fuel and rain, engines cooling down under flickering yellow lights. Steven Seagal stepped inside with his wife. No entourage. No spotlight. Just an older man in dark clothes and a calm woman walking beside him. They chose a booth near the window. Steven sat with his back straight, eyes relaxed, hands resting on the table. His wife smiled softly, flipping through the menu. To anyone watching casually, they looked ordinary. Too ordinary. Outside, a group of bikers roared into the lot. Heavy boots hit the pavement. Leather vests. Loud laughter. The kind of noise that demanded attention. One biker noticed the couple through the glass. He smirked. Inside, the door swung open and the bikers poured in, filling the diner with noise. Conversations dropped. Forks paused midair. The biker leader's eyes locked onto Steven's wife. He nudged his friend and whispered something. Then he walked over. Too close. "Hey," he said, grinning. "Didn't expect to see someone like you in a place like this." She looked up, confused but polite. Steven didn't move. The biker leaned closer, ignoring Steven completely. "Must be hard," he laughed, nodding toward Steven, "being stuck with someone who looks like he should already be asleep." A few bikers chuckled. Steven's wife shifted uncomfortably. Steven still didn't react. The biker grew bolder. "Come on," he said. "You deserve better company than this." That's when Steven slowly lifted his eyes. Not angry. Not emotional. Just focused. The room felt different now. Something heavy settled into the air. Steven turned his head slightly toward the biker and spoke, calm, steady, almost gentle. "You should step away." The biker blinked. Then laughed louder. "And what if I don't?" Steven didn't answer right away. He looked at his wife. Then back at the biker. And in that single moment, everyone in the diner sensed it. This wasn't about ego. This wasn't about pride. A line had been crossed. And once crossed, there was no going back. Backhand index pointing right. What would you do if someone disrespected your family right in front of you? No one in that diner truly knew who Steven Seagal was. To them, he wasn't a legend. He wasn't a trained martial artist. He wasn't a man who had spent decades mastering control, discipline, and real combat. He was just an older guy sitting quietly with his wife. And that's exactly why this moment mattered. Steven hadn't come to prove anything. He hadn't come looking for trouble. In fact, he avoided places like this most days. Crowds brought attention. Attention brought noise. And noise attracted people who mistook silence for weakness. That night, they were only passing through. Long drive. Empty highway. Hunger that couldn't wait. The diner was supposed to be safe. Simple food. Bright lights. Familiar faces. Steven had chosen the booth carefully. Back against the wall. Clear view of the entrance. Not paranoia, habit. A lifetime of habits that never leave you no matter how calm you appear on the outside. His wife noticed it as she always did. "You don't have to watch everyone," she said softly. Steven smiled. "I'm not watching," he replied. "I'm aware." Outside, the bikers were the opposite. Loud. Restless. Fueled by attention and alcohol. Their bikes alone announced them before they even stepped inside. To them, the diner wasn't a place to eat, it was a stage. And stages invite performance. The biker who approached them wasn't the biggest, but he acted like he was. Confidence built on noise. Power built on fear. He had learned long ago that if you act bold enough, most people step aside. That strategy had worked his entire life. Until tonight. Steven's wife sensed the shift before anyone else. Not fear, tension. The biker's voice was playful, but his eyes weren't. They scanned the room, checking for approval. Laughter from his friends fed him. Steven stayed silent on purpose. He believed in something most people didn't understand. Silence reveals more than words. He watched the biker's posture. The balance in his feet. The slight lean forward that signaled disrespect, not confidence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a test. And the biker didn't even know he was taking it. Around them, the diner felt smaller. Other customers avoided eye contact. No one wanted to get involved. They had families, jobs, lives to get back to. That's how moments like this survive. Because people look away. Steven didn't blame them. He had spent years teaching restraint. Teaching that true strength is knowing when not to act. But restraint has limits. And disrespect toward family was one of them. He glanced at his wife again. She wasn't afraid. She trusted him. That trust weighed heavier than anger ever could. Stephen finally spoke, not to threaten, but to end it before it went further. "You're standing too close," he said calmly. The biker heard the words, but he didn't hear the warning. And that's when Stephen knew. This situation was no longer about patience. It was about control. And the next few seconds would change everything. Backhand index pointing right. Have you ever seen someone mistake calmness for weakness? The biker smiled. Not because he was confident, but because he thought he had control. Stephen's calm tone didn't scare him. It irritated him. Men like that don't fear silence. They fear being ignored, and Stephen's lack of reaction felt like an insult. "So what?" the biker said, spreading his arms slightly. "This place yours now?" A few of his friends laughed from the counter. Stephen didn't answer. That silence made it worse. The biker leaned in even closer, close enough that Stephen could smell alcohol on his breath. "You gonna say something?" he mocked. "Or you always let people talk to your woman for you?" That sentence changed the air. Stephen's wife stiffened. Not because she felt helpless, but because she knew what that line meant to Stephen. Still, Stephen didn't move. He believed in giving people chances. The biker mistook that for permission. He turned his attention back to her, flashing a grin that wasn't friendly. "Seriously," he said, eyes scanning her slowly, "you don't belong with someone like him. You could do better." A fork clattered to the floor nearby. No one laughed this time. The room had gone quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears. Stephen finally raised his head fully. His eyes met the biker's. There was no anger in them. Just certainty. "That's enough," Stephen said. The biker scoffed. "Enough of what?" Stephen stood. Slowly. Deliberately. No sudden movements. The height difference didn't matter. The age difference didn't matter. What mattered was presence. Stephen didn't puff his chest. Didn't clench his fists. He simply stood between the biker and his wife. That alone should have ended it. But arrogance is louder than instinct. The biker shoved Stephen's shoulder lightly, not hard enough to start a fight, but just enough to show dominance. A mistake. Stephen felt it, and for the first time he exhaled deeply. Not in anger. In acceptance. He gave one final warning. "You should apologize," he said quietly. The biker laughed again, louder than before, feeding off the tension. "Or what?" he said. "You'll put me to sleep with a bedtime story?" The bikers at the counter shifted uneasily. They weren't laughing now. They were watching. Stephen tilted his head slightly. This wasn't rage. This was calculation. He stepped forward. The biker reached out again, and that's when everything collapsed. In one fluid motion, Stephen deflected the arm, stepped inside the biker's balance, and locked his wrist. There was no build-up. No drama. Just precision. The biker hit the floor hard, breath exploding from his lungs as his arm twisted behind him. The sound of pain filled the diner. People screamed. Chairs scraped backward. Stephen held him there, steady, controlled, not breaking anything but making a point impossible to ignore. He leaned down slightly. "Control," Stephen said calmly, "is what you don't have." The biker tried to move. He couldn't. For the first time that night, fear replaced arrogance. And everyone watching understood something crucial. This wasn't an old man who got lucky. This was a man who had been dangerous his entire life. Backhand index pointing right. "What do you think? Should Stephen have walked away earlier, or was this inevitable?" The diner froze. No music. No chatter. Just the sound of the biker struggling to breathe against the floor. Steven Seagal didn't tighten the hold. He didn't need to. The position itself was enough. A perfect balance of leverage and restraint. Every movement the biker made only increased his own discomfort. Pain without chaos. Control without cruelty. Stephen stayed calm. Almost bored. "Easy," he said quietly, not to threaten, but to instruct. "The more you fight, the worse it gets." The biker stopped moving. Not because he wanted to. Because his body understood something his ego never had. Around them, people stood frozen in disbelief. Moments earlier, Stephen had been invisible. Now no one could look away. One of the bikers at the counter took a step forward, then stopped. Something in Stephen's posture warned him off. This wasn't a street fight. This was a lesson. Stephen looked up slowly, his eyes scanning the room. "Everyone relax," he said evenly. "This is already over." The authority in his voice wasn't loud. It was absolute. He gently shifted his grip, just enough to let the biker breathe fully, but not enough to escape. Then Stephen spoke again, his tone calm but heavy with meaning. "You thought strength was noise," he said. "You thought respect came from fear." He paused. "You were wrong." The biker swallowed hard. People began whispering. Who is that guy? How did he do that? Did you see how fast it happened? Stephen ignored the murmurs. He looked toward his wife. She stood quietly, composed, not shaken, only disappointed. Not in Stephen. In the situation. That look mattered more than anything. Stephen released the hold slowly. The biker collapsed onto his side, gasping, clutching his arm. Stephen stepped back, giving him space, not as mercy but as closure. Stay down, Stephen said. The biker didn't argue. At that moment, one of the diner staff approached hesitantly, phone in hand. Sir, should I call the police? Stephen nodded. Yes. No fear. No urgency. Just procedure. That confused everyone. Men who cause trouble usually leave fast. They run. They hide. They escalate. Stephen did none of that. He returned to his booth and sat down. Picked up his napkin. Wiped his hands. That's when the realization started spreading. This wasn't a man reacting emotionally. This was someone trained, deeply, professionally, to end violence without losing control. One of the older customers finally spoke. In a low voice. That's Steven Seagal. The name traveled like electricity. Heads snapped up. Phones came out. Whispers turned into stunned silence. Steven Seagal? The actor. No, the martial artist. The real one. The biker on the floor heard it too. His eyes widened. Understanding hit him harder than the fall. This wasn't a random stranger. This was someone who had spent a lifetime mastering discipline most people only pretended to have. Security footage would later show the truth. No excessive force. No rage. No retaliation. Just precision. Stephen stood again calmly. He addressed the biker, not with anger but with clarity. You disrespected my wife, he said. That's where this ended. Then he turned to the rest of the bikers. You came here loud, he continued. You leave quiet. No threats. No bravado. Yet every biker nodded. They helped their friend up carefully, avoiding eye contact with Stephen. Their confidence was gone. Replaced by something heavier. Respect. Or fear. It didn't matter. As they moved toward the exit, Stephen added one final sentence. Soft but unmistakable. Remember this moment, he said. Not because you lost, but because you learned. The door closed behind them. Silence returned. Stephen sat back down beside his wife. She touched his hand. That didn't have to happen, she said gently. Stephen nodded. No, he replied. But it was going to. Outside, sirens approached. Inside, everyone understood one thing. They hadn't witnessed violence. They had witnessed restraint. And restraint, in the hands of the disciplined, is the most dangerous thing of all. Backhand index pointing right. Do you think real power is shown through force, or through control? The sirens grew louder outside. Red and blue lights washed across the diner windows, flashing over faces still frozen in disbelief. No one moved. No one spoke. It felt like the world had paused, as if everyone needed a second to process what they had just witnessed. Steven Seagal didn't rush. He never did. He remained seated, calm, composed, his presence steady as the chaos he had stopped. His wife sat beside him, hand resting lightly on the table, eyes forward. She wasn't shaken, just thoughtful. The biker lay on the floor near the entrance, arm clutched to his chest, pride in pieces. His friends stood a few steps away, unsure whether to help him or distance themselves. For the first time that night they looked small. The police entered. 2 officers. Hands near their belts. Eyes scanning quickly, trained to expect resistance. What happened here? One of them asked. Several voices spoke at once. He started it. He wouldn't leave them alone. That man barely touched him. Stephen stood slowly. Not to assert dominance, but to cooperate. I restrained him, Stephen said calmly. He was harassing my wife. No excuses. No dramatics. Just facts. The officers looked at the biker, then at Stephen, then at the witnesses. The story was consistent. The truth had weight. One officer glanced at Stephen again, squinting slightly. Sir, are you Steven Seagal? Stephen nodded once. Yes. That was it. No pride in the answer. The biker heard it clearly now. And something inside him broke. Not his arm, not his body, but his illusion. All night, he had believed power came from intimidation. From being louder. From making others uncomfortable. But now, lying there, surrounded by silence and flashing lights, he understood the truth far too late. He had never been powerful. Just unchecked. The officers helped him up. He winced, but Stephen didn't intervene. This part wasn't his responsibility anymore. As the bikers were escorted outside, one of them turned back. Not with anger. With something close to shame. Stephen met his eyes. No smirk. No victory. Just a look that said, learn from this. When the door closed again, the diner exhaled. People whispered openly now. That was unbelievable. He didn't even raise his voice. I thought it was going to turn ugly. Stephen sat back down. He didn't bask in attention. Didn't give interviews. Didn't explain himself. He simply returned to his meal. That confused people even more. His wife finally spoke, her voice low but clear. Do you ever get tired of this? She asked. Stephen paused. I get tired of people thinking kindness is weakness, he said. That was the bigger truth. He hadn't stood up because he wanted to fight. He stood up because if he didn't, the message would be wrong. That disrespect has no cost. That silence means permission. That arrogance goes unchallenged. Stephen believed something deeply. If you tolerate disrespect toward those you love, you teach the world it's acceptable. Around them, the staff slowly returned to work. Coffee poured. Plates cleared. Life resumed, but everyone moved differently now. Quieter. More aware. The manager approached hesitantly. Sir, your meal is on the house. Stephen shook his head. No, he said gently. Just do your job the same way you always do. The manager nodded, humbled. Stephen wasn't there to take. He was there to remind. As they stood to leave, Stephen paused near the door. He looked back at the room, at the strangers who had witnessed everything. Respect isn't about fear, he said. It's about boundaries. No one interrupted. When people cross them, he continued, they're not brave. They're lost. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in. Outside, the parking lot was quiet now. The bikes were gone. The noise had disappeared. Only stillness remained. Stephen walked beside his wife toward their car. No cameras followed. No applause echoed. Just two people leaving a place calmer than they found it. Because real strength doesn't announce itself. Corrects what's wrong. And then walks away. Backhand index pointing right. Do you think moments like this change people? Or do they only reveal who they already were? The parking lot was quiet now. The distant sound of motorcycles faded into the night, leaving only the hum of the highway and the soft click of cooling engines. Steven Seagal opened the car door for his wife, waited until she was seated, then walked around and got in himself. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The kind of silence that follows something heavy. Not awkward. Not tense. Reflective. Stephen rested his hands on the steering wheel but didn't start the engine. You didn't have to step in, his wife said gently. Stephen nodded. I know, he replied. He stared through the windshield, eyes calm but thoughtful. But I chose to. That was the difference. Not reaction. Decision. All his life, Stephen had learned one truth the hard way. Violence happens fastest when people refuse to make decisions early. When they hesitate. When they hope someone else will draw the line. Tonight he had drawn it himself. Back inside the diner, the aftermath continued. Police officers finished taking statements. Customers slowly paid and left, each one carrying the moment with them. Some would forget it by morning. Others would remember it for years. The biker, sitting on the curb outside, cradled his arm while an officer spoke to him quietly. The bravado was gone. Replaced by something unfamiliar. Accountability. For the first time, his actions had consequences that couldn't be laughed off or ridden away from. Stephen knew this type of man. Not evil. Just undisciplined. Men like that didn't change because they were punished. They changed because they were confronted. And sometimes they didn't change at all. Stephen had accepted that long ago. He started the car. As they pulled out of the lot, his wife looked back at the diner one last time. Do you think he learned anything? She asked. Stephen considered the question carefully. I think he learned he's not invincible, he said. What he does with that knowledge is his choice. The road stretched ahead of them, empty, dark, open. Stephen preferred it that way. He had spent years teaching, training, advising. Trying to show people that real power isn't loud. That control isn't weakness. That restraint is a skill most never master. Tonight had been another lesson. Not delivered in a classroom. But in reality. Hours later, the biker would replay the moment in his head. The stillness. The grip. The ease with which he had been stopped. Not humiliated. Corrected. That distinction mattered. Because humiliation breeds anger. Correction creates reflection. Stephen didn't hate him. He never did. Hatred clouds judgment. And judgment is everything. As the car disappeared down the highway, Stephen's wife broke the silence again. Most people would have exploded, she said. Or walked away. Stephen smiled faintly. Both are easy, he replied. She looked at him, curious. Choosing the middle, he continued, that's the hard part. He drove on. The night swallowed the road behind them. Inside the diner, the staff locked the doors early. The place felt different now. Safer, somehow. As if a reset button had been pressed. And somewhere out there, a biker rode home in silence. No laughter. No music. Just thought. The decision had already been made, not by Stephen but by life itself. Cross certain lines. And the world responds. Stephen didn't wait for gratitude. He didn't expect praise. He had done what needed to be done. And that was enough. Morning came quietly. Steven Seagal woke before the sun as he always did. The world outside the motel window was still, untouched by the noise of the night before. No sirens. No engines. Just calm. He sat at the edge of the bed for a moment, breathing slowly. Discipline never sleeps. Beside him, his wife stirred and opened her eyes. She smiled faintly. Did you sleep? She asked. Stephen nodded. Enough. They didn't need to talk about the diner. They both knew what had happened, and more importantly, why it had happened. Some moments don't need replaying. They settle on their own. Later that morning they stopped at another diner. Different town. Different faces. Same simple routine. No one recognized Stephen. No one stared. No one whispered. And that was exactly how he preferred it. They ordered coffee. Sat near the window. The server smiled, treated them kindly, and moved on. Normal. That's what Stephen had always fought for. The right for people to live without being tested by someone else's ego. As they waited, Stephen watched the room quietly. A young couple laughed over breakfast. An older man read the newspaper. A tired truck driver stared into his cup, lost in thought. Ordinary people. Most of them would never throw a punch. Never raise their voice. Never confront anyone. And yet, every one of them deserved respect. That was the lesson. Not strength. Not fame. Not fear. Respect. The night before hadn't been about proving who Steven Seagal was. It had been about reminding one man, and everyone watching, what happens when respect disappears. His wife reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You always choose control, she said softly. Stephen smiled. Because control lasts, he replied. Power fades. Youth fades. Reputation fades. But control? Control stays. Somewhere down the road, the biker woke up sore, humiliated, and quiet. His friends didn't joke with him the way they used to. Something had shifted. The story would be told again and again, not as a tale of defeat but of realization. He wouldn't say he lost a fight. He'd say he met someone different. And maybe, just maybe, the next time he felt that urge to step too close, to mock, to test someone smaller, he'd stop. Not because he was afraid of Steven Seagal, but because he remembered how small arrogance had made him feel. Stephen finished his coffee and stood. Before leaving, he spoke to the server. Thank you, he said sincerely. The server smiled back. Anytime. Outside, the sun had risen fully now. The road waited. Stephen walked beside his wife the same way he always did. Not ahead, not behind. Beside. Because that's what respect looks like. No spotlight followed them. No headlines were written. And that was the real ending. The strongest people don't need stories told about them. They leave lessons behind instead. Stephen wasn't dangerous because he could hurt someone. He was dangerous because he knew when not to. Because he understood that true strength is quiet, measured, and patient. And when it finally moves, it moves with purpose. The diner from the night before would return to normal. New customers. New noise. New moments. But for those who were there, they would remember. Not the pain. Not the fear. The control. And that's why everything changed.